بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله كما ينبغي لجلال وجهه وعظيم سلطانه والصلاة والسلام على أطيب المرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. So this is the third segment of the series, which is Love is Blind. And I am not very sure of what was covered in the first two. So forgive me if I am going to repeat something that was already said and you heard it before. Inshallah khair. Okay, so so my prompt, if you will, was to talk about marriage from an Islamic point of view, mainly, and then if I have suggestions on how our young people can go about getting married. So these are the questions I'm covering, inshallah, biznillah. We are going to begin with first a look at what is happening in the US, because definitely the larger community trends impact what's happening with our young people. So let's go ahead and take a look. Unfortunately, the slides, I mean, you can't see them very well, but I was surprised to find out that in 2024, there was something called Single Awareness Day on February 15, 2024. So maybe this is just a reflection of a growing trend in the US, which is the proportion of adults who are not married at any given moment, and that is due to that they have never married in the first place, or they got married and then divorced, or they were married and then they were widowed. So the graph, unfortunately, that is not maybe very clear, but I'm gonna hopefully point to something. There are two lines here. Okay, I hope you can see there are two lines, and they are showing you a change from the 1950 to 2023. The line down here is showing you the number of unmarried people in the US, and the line on top is showing you the number and percentage of people who are married in the US. I hope you can see that from 1950 to 2023, the two lines are almost converging. So basically, we are at a point where the number and percentages of single people in the US are just a little bit less than the number of married people. And the other trends that are happening in the US is how young people are actually thinking of marriage. So these are some of what we're hearing from them. This is also the larger US population. It's not necessarily young Muslim men and women. However, our young Muslim men and women are also impacted by the larger societal trends. So our young people, some of them are saying, marriage is old-fashioned and out of date. Marriage is not as important as personal commitment. So there is an increase in the rate of people who are cohabitating, meaning they're living together, but they're not married. Because they tell you, what's this piece of paper? The marriage contract, it's just a piece of paper. We can just live together and do everything as a couple, and we're going to be fine. And there is a psychologist out of Harvard, I can't remember his name right now. However, it was very interesting. He commented, he was cohabitating with his girlfriend for like 7 years. And then they decided to get married. And he was surprised to see the difference it made to him after getting married. He didn't expect that. He thought that it's going to be the same. So keep in mind that, you know, there is weight to the marriage contract and the marriage process. Some say that marriage is more of a burden, and that actually fits with the focus, especially increasingly in the US right now, of focusing on personal autonomy, personal control, personal freedom. I don't want anyone to bother me. I don't want to be responsible for anyone. Another one is, I don't need to get married very quickly. Let's just, we are in a relationship. Let's just take it slow and see where it goes. And then the cohabitation, which I mentioned to you, and the last one, which definitely impacts our young men and women, which is, it's one of the obstacles I must be sure. I must be sure before I actually jump and get married. Okay. So this is the lay of the land in the US. Now let's go ahead and see, what does Islam say about marriage? Why is marriage important in Islam? So there are two main, let's say, two main purposes of marriage in Islam. The first one, which I'm sure that you've all heard this one, Surah Ar-Rum, Ayah 21. What does Allah say? And among His signs is that He created for you from yourselves mates, that you may come to them for sakina, and He put amongst you mawadda and rahmah. Verily, in that are indeed the signs of for people who reflect. I want you to reflect a little bit on this ayah, and I'm sure you've heard descriptions and translations and reflections on this ayah so many times. I just want to add maybe hopefully something a little bit nuanced and a little bit new for you. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing that in marriage we are to find sakina. And how do we translate sakina? Sakina is again one of those Arabic words that is very hard to translate into English. It takes in the meanings of so many English words. So it includes inner peace, tranquility, contentment, comfortable, support. There's so many layers to sakina. You cannot translate it into one English word. So we want to use the Arabic word. We want to really start using that. One of the main purposes of marriage is to have sakina for the individual. Okay? Now, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues and He says that He put amongst the spouses mawadda and rahmah. So let's stop here for a minute. And these two, the mawadda and rahmah, these two are the pillars of sakina. If you want to have sakina in the marriage, you have to have these two, mawadda and rahmah. You cannot have sakina without these two. So what is mawadda? Let's begin with that. For the longest time when I asked myself, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use the word mawadda in this ayah and He didn't use the word hub? Because in Quran, Allah talks about hub. Okay, there is the hub of Allah, there is the hub of the Prophet, there is hub in the Quran. It's not like the word is not mentioned. But it's not there when it came to describing or talking about marriage. And the way in the beginning I used to explain it is like, because, not all marriages are actually based on hub or love, basically, which is if you will, it's a more of a recent phenomena that we marry for love. But before, in previous generations and previous times, people didn't marry for love. They had other reasons to get married. So anyway, until I heard a description of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by Dr. Amr Khalid, who's out of Egypt. So he was describing the different names of Allah, and then he came to the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Wadud, which comes from the same root of Al-Wud. And he said, Al-Wadud means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us through His actions. So Wud is love through action. And I want you to reflect about how beautiful it is that Allah emphasized in marriage mawadda, which is love through action. It's not only the love I feel in my heart, it's about what am I doing for my spouse? What kind of action am I taking for my spouse to prove to my spouse that I actually care and love him or her? So that's the first component of sakina, love in action. Second component of sakina is rahmah. We translate it generally to mercy. Well, I want you to reflect again on where does rahmah come into the marriage? Rahmah comes into the marriage because we are two imperfect human beings that are coming together. None of us is perfect. Marriage is not about finding a perfect spouse, because I'm not perfect, my spouse is not perfect. This is where rahmah comes in. Rahmah is about understanding the shortcomings of my spouse, knowing them, so I'm not blinded to them, accepting them, and figuring out how I'm going to deal with them. If I can do these two things, mawadda, which is love in action, and I can do the rahmah, which is the acceptance and figuring out how am I going to deal and tolerate the shortcomings of my spouse, then yes, inshallah, we can have sakina in the marriage. So the first purpose of marriage in Islam on an individual level is to have sakina. You as an individual, you have sakina with your spouse. The second, before I go to the second purpose, main purpose, I just want to share with you, because some people sometimes dismiss or minimize what is the benefit of being in marriage. Actually, psychologists have done a lot of research on married couples, and there are health benefits to being married. Like, you're less likely to die from a heart attack, you will live longer life, you will have better financial stability, better work performance, better career satisfaction, fewer chronic health problems. Of course, you will provide your children with a better physical and emotional health outcomes, better immune system, and a higher level of sexual satisfaction. So we need to keep this in mind. It's actually, through the different studies, marriage is actually a good marriage, a working marriage, a marriage that has sakina, because I don't want to dismiss that there are marriages that do not work. And I don't want to dismiss that there are marriages where abuse actually happens. And those marriages are not the marriages I'm talking about when I'm talking about the benefits of marriage. So let's be clear, okay? So now, going to the next purpose, if you will, of marriage. Now we're talking about, I talked about the benefit or the purpose of marriage from an Islamic point on an individual level. Let's go to it from a societal level. Social scientists, when they assess societies, they describe them in one of two terms. They describe a society as either an individualistic society or a society that is a collectivist society. And so in an individualistic society, which is the society we live in, the society in the US, the rights and the needs of the individual supersede those of the community. In a collectivistic society, the rights of the group or the community supersede the needs of the individual. Islam, or the Muslim community, is neither individualistic, neither a collectivistic society. It's actually what we're going to call interdependent. And what is an interdependent society? It means that every person has rights, but at the same time, they have obligations towards the other people in the society. So we need to find a balance always between the needs of the individual and the needs of the group. And there are many rules within our tradition that actually govern this intricate balance between an individual and a group. And marriage is one of them. The institution of marriage and the rules around marriage is one of the ways where we actually create an interdependent community. If you think about it, what happens in marriage? You have two people from two separate families coming together. And then they inshallah, establish a new family. So what's happening is you end up having children that will become responsible for all the generations before them and the generations that come after them. And that's what is meant by interdependence, that I have an obligation to the elders, no matter how far we go up, so great-grandfather, of course they have to be alive, and I have a responsibility to my descendants. So that would be my children and grandchildren. And if I married young, then it could be great-grandchildren too. They also have a responsibility towards me. That's the interdependence. So everybody has a right, everybody has a responsibility. And from the beauty of Islam, even the fetus in the womb of the mother, before he or she is born, they have a right. They have a right to inheritance before they are born. Where do you see this in other communities or other societies or other frameworks? And all of this revolves around the marital relationship. So marriage and the marital relationship is a framework for rights and responsibilities in the community. They define, the marital relationship defined who is responsible for who and who has a right on who. Another point to mention, so I said, just to recap, from an Islamic point of view, there are two main purposes for marriage. One, on an individual level, we talked about sakina, having sakina. The second one, on a societal level, and that one is the interdependence or the taking care of the rights and responsibilities of the different individuals in the society. So marriage ultimately is the foundational relationship in any given society. And that began even with Adam alayhi salam, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam, and immediately after Adam was created, Hawa was created. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes in the Quran that almost everything in the creation comes in pairs except for him. He's the only being. Nothing else is single like that. Everything else comes in pairs, including us, human beings. So I know you know all this information. This is just a reminder, since we're talking about the topic of marriage, to remember what's the Islamic criteria to look for when you are looking for a husband. The Prophet ﷺ emphasized two main things, which is faith, or the practice of faith, the practice of Islam, and character. These two have to go together. You cannot dismiss one over the other. So character is very important, and also faith is very important at the same time. The next one, of course, you all know it, which is what do we look for when we are searching for a wife? And you all know this. People, marry a woman for 4 reasons: money, lineage, her beauty, and her faith. I'm mentioning this and emphasizing this because our young men nowadays, they are emphasizing beauty. And emphasizing beauty, I'm not telling them don't emphasize beauty. However, it's actually prohibiting them from even considering wonderful candidates, wonderful women, just because they don't see them as beautiful as they want them to be or they think they should be. And I'm cautioning, I'm being very vocal right now here. And I'm telling all of our young men, this beauty, this physical beauty that you see, after you get married, it's not gonna last unless you're actually emotionally connected, unless you actually see the beauty, the inner beauty of the woman. So consider that beauty is important. Yes, you need to be attracted to the young woman, but don't make it as a criteria to actually dismiss very good young sisters out there. I wasn't sure if, Omar, you're going to list the obstacles on a society level. Are you touching on that? Not much? Shall I go with that? Okay. How much money? 5? Yeah, I'm almost done. Okay, these are the obstacles to marriage in the American Muslim community. This is our list. Why is it that our young men and women are having a hard time getting married? So the first one is the list. They have a list of criteria, and if anyone doesn't fit this list, then we're not going to even get to know them, we're not going to even talk to them, we're not going to even consider them. Okay? Our young people are struggling finding spouse. They don't know where to find a spouse. Where do we look for a spouse? Because we put some restrictions on them that are unreasonable. We tell them they can go and speak to all the non-Muslims out there in school, in work, at college, but when it comes to our, to our community, no, you can't talk to her. No, you can't even. So I'm not saying we need to become permissive and cross boundaries that are very clear in Islam, but we need to also allow them to get to know one another in a casual way, because that would be easier for them to get to find out if someone is a good fit for them or not. Parents, I'm glad we have so many parents here. The number one obstacle parents invoke is ethnicity. I'm being very candid with you. I get young people who come to me and tell me, oh, my mom, my dad, they want me to marry from this ethnicity. I cannot marry someone outside of this ethnicity. Please, our young men and women are American Muslims. This is their ethnicity. So please expand your horizons. Please don't prohibit your children from considering people outside of your cultural and ethnic group. Different cultural stigmas, related to how we find spouses, and one of the main reasons why also young people are having a hard time is they are waiting to fall in love, and when they are not finding themselves falling in love, they're not actually considering possibilities out there. Money is an issue, and so we as parents have to be helpful in not really demanding too much from a good candidate who is good in character, good in deen, and has potential, inshallah, to be a good provider later on. But right now, for example, he's studying. He's still, setting up his life. So let's be careful around that. And then seeking perfection, I touched upon that. Some people are just seeking perfect spouses, and that's very unreal. Non-traditional women and traditional men, young men who are expecting to be married to only women who are willing to stay home. And they are refusing to even consider women who are career women or who want to work, who want to balance also family and life. And then the next one is girls who follow the rules. So those are girls who actually don't go out of their way and flirt with young men, because they actually respect the rules of Islam, and they behave with our young men in the proper, respectful manner. So sometimes those get missed just because they are following the rules. And then we talked about, and the bucket list is for some young people who have a list of, I want to do all of these things before I even consider marriage. So I'm just going to quickly here, just inviting you, all of the young people here. If you know yourself, you're ready to get married, please begin by understanding yourself, understanding what you're looking for, please. And then start looking around. And if you have a supportive family, please involve your family. Wallahi, your family will have your back. I'm saying if you have supportive families. I know, because some families are actually the obstacle. So I'm not talking about those families. But involve people you respect and value their opinion. If you cannot reach out to your family, reach out to the imam, local imam, reach out to your mentors, reach out to people of wisdom, people with experience, because they really will help you in this process. Don't do this alone. And please don't get to know someone and fall in love with them and then figure out the problems later on. Okay? Please don't do that. You are interested in someone, then involve other people in getting to know that person. So it's not like a private relationship between you and that person. Get input. And may Allah bless you all. May Allah grant you Qurrat Ain, and may Allah grant you marriages with sakina, mawadda, and rahmah. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.